Thanks, Mallory. When the words "to be continued" flash up on the screen, to be continued, I generally find that there's two responses. There's the kind of person that is like, "Ah!" and they want to throw something at the screen, right? They're the kind of people, they're like, I just cannot wait. I cannot wait for the next season to go. I cannot wait. There's just not enough time. And those people, they're just like losing their ever-loving minds. And then there's the kind of people, they're like, oh, yes, that means there's more of the story to come. They're going to release another series. They're going to write another book. They're going to make another movie. And you're like, boom, that means there's more of whatever I love is coming this way. So let's find out in the house tonight. How many of you, if I say "to be continued," who of you just say, I love "to be continued"? Raise your hand. You love it because there's more to come. Make noise. All right, there's 4 of you. There are 4 right over here and a couple sprinkled out here. Raise your hand and make some noise if you just cannot stand "to be continued." It drives you crazy. I get it, I really do. The reason I get it is because I can feel you when I'm so impatient. When someone's texting me and they're taking too long and those text bubbles come up, and I'm like, for real? Could you just hit send? Are you writing a novel? Like, today, Junior? Like, I get it, right? I just want to know what's going to happen. There's some of you out there, like season 3 of Stranger Things just dropped last month, and you've already watched it, and now you're like, what am I going to do for the next year and a half of my life, right? Like, it's just pointless. What are we doing, right? Well, the "to be continueds" are a big deal. Whether you love them or whether you hate them, they're a super big deal. And we are in the middle of a "to be continued" moment with our boy Elijah, the prophet, and Elisha, our new character we talked about. If you have your Bibles, open up with me to 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 2. You got your Bibles? 3 of you? Come on, open them up. Let's find them. You got your notebooks, your pens, your pencils. It's our last night together. Let's dive in. 2 Kings chapter 2. So Elijah was in a cave last night. We talked about him being in a cave and God saying, listen, I want you to go anoint 3 guys. One of the guys he asked him to go anoint was named Elisha. Now, I don't know about you, but this really bothers me that God picked their names to be so close to each other. Elijah, Elisha, I'm like, which one is it? J comes before S in the alphabet. And then it's summertime, so my brain's not really working. But Elijah comes first. Elisha comes second. Shh, you guys listening? So here's what happens. He goes to anoint him and he throws his cloak over him. Now this would be kind of a weird thought, but the cloak is a symbol of his calling as a prophet. So his job as a prophet is to speak God's words, and when he does that, that's the role of the prophet. And he throws his cloak over Elisha, and Elisha is farming. He's like plowing the fields, he's got his oxen, he's got his horses, he's doing his thing. And it says here that as soon as Elijah throws the cloak over Elisha's like, peace, I'm out. I'm going to kill my oxen. I'm burning all my farm equipment. There's no turning back. I'm going to go follow Elijah, and I'm going to be a servant. I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. He does this for years, but the Bible doesn't really tell us what he does as a servant, which I think is kind of strange. There's one little tiny detail. It says Elisha took a water bottle and he poured water over the hands of Elijah. I think that's a strange thing. Like, what was his role? My friend Joel, he jokes and he says, maybe he was the hand sanitizer servant or the Purell prophet, like a pump for you, a pump for you, a pump for you. It's your youth leader when you're in line at Chick-fil-A. She just goes down the row, like everybody gets some, no germs, 99.9% germ-free. Elijah's hands were great, but I don't really know what he did. But I do know that as the time got close to the end for Elijah to go back up into heaven, it says this, that he was going to be picked up in a whirlwind. This is mind-blowing to me. How do we sign up to go that way? Do you know how often I stress about, how is it that I'm going to die? You think of all these crazy, morbid ways. I read the news too much. You guys, he is literally beamed up by God. It's the craziest thing. I don't know how he got that, but he's going to go up to heaven. And he turns to Elijah and he says this. He says, Elijah, I'm getting ready to go. My time is almost over. I'm about to go up in this whirlwind. Is there anything I can do for you before I leave? Elisha says this. He says, hey, it would be really, really cool if I could have a double portion of your spirit. What does that mean? It basically means I want to be able to do what you can do and then some. I want to be able to do the miracles you do, to have the authority that you have, to speak God's words the way you do, but I want it to be even more than that, even better than that. And Elijah, he's like, well, if God lets you see me when I go up to heaven, you can get the double portion. Guess what Elisha does? He's like, I am not leaving. Elijah's got to go to the bathroom. Elisha is right there. I'll wait for you right outside, not awkwardly. Like, he is not going anywhere. Elijah's like, I have to go to Jericho. And he's like, well, guess I'm going to Jericho. He says, hey, I got to go to Bethel. You can stay here. He goes, no. I'm following you to Jericho. Then he says, I got to go to the Jordan. And he's like, well, guess where I'm going? Like white on rice, baby. I am sticking with you wherever you go. And that's where our story picks up. 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11. Are you ready? As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them. And Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Verse 12, Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and the horsemen of Israel. And Elisha saw him no more, and then he took hold of his garment and he tore it in two. I really hope he had an undershirt on, because I don't know if the women on the Jordan River saw that. We don't want anybody stumbling, but he tears his garments apart. If you're reading that and you're like me, you're like, why is he tearing his clothes? That's odd. That's what they did in the Old Testament. That's one of the ways they showed they were mourning and they were sad. You guys, he was feeling all the feels, because right now, his friend, his mentor, the person he's been following and learning how to do kingdom work from, is gone. And he is feeling it so deeply. Let's read verse 13. Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak. Remember what the cloak meant. The cloak's important. It's a symbol of this kind of prophetic calling. He picks up the cloak that had fallen from him, and he went back and stood on the Jordan. You guys, what's crazy to me is Elisha was so close that he could literally bend down and pick it up. So right where Elijah finished, his finish line becomes Elisha's starting line, and he gets to pick up the kingdom work and just start continuing running the race. He's like, all right, now it's my turn. I have a job to do. This is what he does. Who is your Elijah? If you're taking notes today, write down, who is my Elijah? Who is in your life that you just look at them and you think, man, they love God, they love people, and I just want a double portion of what they have. Now, this just isn't for the students tonight. Even in my life, I'm always asking myself, who is somebody who's pouring into me, who's showing me what it looks like to live a life for Jesus? Who is your Elijah? When I was in middle school, my Elijah was my mom. And I know that might sound a little cheesy, but every morning when I would stumble downstairs and my hair's all wacky and I'm going down looking for anything to eat, I'm like ravaging through, looking for those, Lucky Charms, looking for the Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Every morning I'd come downstairs and there she'd sit, right in the same spot, with her Bible open, with her cup of coffee in hand, and she would just be sitting there writing down and journaling and praying and talking to Jesus. You guys, I watched my mom, not just in those moments, but when we'd go to the grocery store, I can stand going to the grocery store, because she'd find someone to help or someone to talk to, and then she'd be like, we're in the parking lot, and she's praying for people. I'm like, what is happening? I was so embarrassed. But now I look and I think, you know what? She showed me what it looked like to live for Jesus. And I was following her closely because, you know what? I'm her daughter. I can't go anywhere, right? She was my Elijah, but I wonder who your Elijah is. If you don't have one, if you're thinking, Jacyln, I have no clue. If that's you tonight, I don't want you to feel bad, but I want you to start praying and say, Lord, who is it in my life that I could start following? That I could be like Elisha and I could just follow alongside of them and learn what it means to live for Jesus, because God's kingdom work continues first inside of us. Everybody say, in us. Before he does the work through us, he does deep stuff in us, and that's where he starts. So several months before the Olympics, they light this gigantic flame, this Olympic flame in Olympia, Greece. Now, I've never been to Greece, but Olympia is where the Olympics began, and they light this gigantic flame. And then what they do is they take a torch, and they take that torch, and they go up to the flame, and they light the torch. And then that torch is taken from Olympia, the birthplace of the Olympics, and it's taken to wherever the Olympics are going to be held that year. So in 1996, the Olympics were held in Atlanta, so they light the torch, and then a relay race starts where people carry this torch and they pass it to different people, countries to countries, states to states, until it gets to Atlanta. And then when it's in Atlanta, then they use that torch at opening ceremonies to light the Olympic cauldron, and then the games begin, right? Dun, 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 dun. You know that song? No? Just me? Okay. So this is an actual Olympic torch from the Olympic torch relay. I borrowed it from a pastor. It's actually only half the torch. It's like about this much bigger than it is, but I packed it in my suitcase and I wrapped it in blankets and put pillows around it, but guess what? It broke. And I borrowed it from Pastor Larry at my church. And so somehow, with a lot of prayer and a lot of duct tape, I am going to pray that this thing magically grows back because it is broken. But it's still pretty heavy and still pretty awesome, and this is where it would be lit. Well, anyway, Pastor Larry and his wife got to be torchbearers in the Olympic relay. It was an honor to carry the torch and to pass it all the way till it got to Atlanta. Did you guys know that we're torchbearers? That we bear the torch of Jesus. Check this verse out. Psalm 145, verse 4 through 7. One generation commends your works to another. They tell of your mighty acts. Some of you guys have had God do crazy, awesome stuff in your life this week. You're like, hey, I'm not in a cave anymore. I'm out. I'm free. Some of you have given your life to Jesus. Some of you have made great friends. God's done awesome stuff in you, and you have something to tell. You have a story to tell. You have a torch to pass because the light of Jesus has been lit in your heart, and Jesus says you're the light of the world, and we're to take this and we're to pass it to our friends, to our family, to our neighbors, to our soccer players, to anybody who will listen. But there's a warning that goes with this. Some people, when you guys go back home, we're surrounded by friends here, friends that are trying to run the race for Jesus and are trying to carry the torch. But sometimes when we go back home, we find out not everybody's excited about our new torch. Sometimes people feel like, oh gosh, what's that? Oh, and they feel convicted by your torch. Some people are like, oh no, they're annoyed by it because now you won't go do the stuff you used to do with them because you're trying to follow Jesus, and they don't like your torch and they want to put it out. In Brazil, they had one of these relay races with the torch before the Olympics in Brazil, and there was actually a protester that came with a big fire extinguisher and tried to put it out. Check this video out. Here he comes. Here comes the bad guy out of the crowd, right through security. Oh, jeez. And then he tackles him. He goes down. Do you guys watch how this guy, he doesn't even skip a beat. He's running and he just keeps on going. Then they decide, you know what, maybe we should give him a break. We're gonna bring in another guy and we're gonna pass the torch and we're gonna keep on running. You guys, this is real life. My husband told me that there was another guy that had big buckets of water, and he thought if I can just get the buckets of water onto it, I can make national media and I can extinguish the flame. But when you leave this place, there's gonna be people that don't like your torch, and this is your warning. So what do? You guys, most of you are here with your youth groups or youth groups that you're friends with, and when people try to extinguish your flame, we gotta gather around them. We gotta be their bodyguards and say, not today, not on my watch. We're gonna keep this flame lit. We're gonna help each other carry the torch and share the good news of Jesus. Why? Because God's kingdom work continues. Last words are memorable. If you've ever had a family member or a friend or a teacher, someone that you know and you love pass away, you know that last words are something that you never forget. My sixth grade year of school, it was a really great year and a really awful year. It was a really great year because it was the year my whole family came to know Jesus. My whole family got to know him that year and came to know him, but it was also the year that my dad passed away. And the night before my dad died, I got to have a conversation with him in the hospital, and it's a conversation I'll never forget. He was laying on a stretcher. He was not doing well at all. I think, in hindsight, that he probably knew it was our last conversation. I was 12 years old, and I was a new Christian. My dad was a new Christian, and my dad's laying there, only 40 years old, and he's laying there, and he's struggling. I could tell he was in pain. I was telling he was hurting, but I held his hand, and he looked at me, and he said, "Jacyln, I love you so much." I said, "I love you too, Dad." And he said, and I want you to promise me one thing. And I'm thinking, anything. Like my dad's like laying here literally, I didn't know he was dying, but I knew he was bad. And I was like, anything you need, Dad, whatever you need, I'll do it. And he said, I want you to promise me one thing, that you'll always follow after Jesus. He could have said a lot of things. He could have said, promise me that you grow up and become famous and you make a lot of money. He could have said a lot of things like, hey, do this or do that or do this. But he told me the most important thing was that I follow after Jesus. You guys, I'll never forget those words, because where my dad's race was over, he was passing the torch to me. Just like Elijah passed it on to Elisha, my dad said, here, it's your turn, girl, go run. Go follow after Jesus. No matter what happens, no matter who tries to extinguish that flame, don't stop, keep running, because God's kingdom work continues. You guys, my dad, God's kingdom work continued even after he dies. And you know what? Even after I'm gone, God's kingdom work's gonna continue. After we're all gone, God's kingdom's work is going to continue. But the cool part is, we get to be a part right here and right now. Jesus had some last words for his disciples. They're found in Matthew 28. You might have heard it before. It's called the Great Commission. Listen to this, verse 18. Jesus said to them, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go make disciples. You know what that word disciples just means? Followers. Go make followers of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And he says this to them. He says, listen, take the torch I've given you and go give it to somebody else, because this is such good news. We cannot keep it to ourselves. He says, how do you build my kingdom? Go make disciples. So I'm wondering, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like kingdom work, build God's kingdom. It just sounds good, but like really, how do I do that? I want you to meet Mary. This is Mary. Mary's the one on the right, and this is her friend Rachel on the left. Mary is a kingdom worker. In this picture, Mary was in the 7th grade, and she got a phone call late one night that her friend, who she'd kind of been inviting to church and trying to share Jesus with, her friend was in the hospital, and they had no idea what was wrong with her. They couldn't get her vitals quite right, and they were trying to check her for all these different diseases. And the parents just said, hey, we know that you're Christians. Would you mind praying for our sweet girl, Rachel? So Mary and her family all start praying for Rachel. And then Mary comes back to her parents. She said, Mom, Dad, I got to do something else. Would you please take me down there? And her parents are like, that might be a bad idea. We don't know what to expect. But Mary begs them, and finally she gets to the hospital. You guys, she shows up with teddy bears and a hug and a prayer. It's not hard. It's not something that is like, wow, like that's such a big deal, Jacyln. But you know what? This meant the world to her friend Rachel. She was literally the hands and feet of Jesus in that moment. It was Mary passing the torch and continuing God's kingdom work in the life of her friend. Here's another picture of Mary. This summer, Mary is teaching Vacation Bible School to a bunch of kids. My son, who's in the 4th grade now, and he thinks he's way too cool for VBS. All right, he's like, everybody say yes, yes to VBS. He's like, everybody say no, Mom, please don't make me go. Like, he did not want to go to VBS. But he goes. I forced him or bribed him, whatever. And we get him there, and then he says to me this. He goes, Mom, I said, how was it, Mason? He goes, Mom, Miss Mary talked, and it was awesome. Now, there's a lady named Mary that works on staff at our church. And so I text Mary, and I said, Mary, Mason said that you did an awesome job. Thanks so much for sharing Jesus. She goes, Jacyln, it wasn't me. I said, well, who was it? She goes, it was Mary Hoffman. Mary Hoffman is just a couple years older than you, and here she is sharing Jesus and passing the torch to a bunch of kids who think she is the coolest thing on the planet. You guys, Mary is passing the faith. Meet Bennett. This is Bennett in the middle. This is my Mason on the right and my Adele over on the left. This is them a couple years ago. Bennett showed up on adoption day for my little guy, John Mark. And he played with my kids and entertained them while I was talking to lawyers and signing papers. He showed up on a big day just to serve my family. He's a friend of a friend, and he just kind of came along to help. But one day, Bennett wrote a note to my kids in the school mail system. He was in the 5th grade. My little kids were 2nd grade and kindergarten, so they were much younger. And Bennett writes this note to Mason. Hopefully you can read it. Dear Mason, I can really tell you're growing into a great student and friend. Keep being a leader. I can tell your friends look up to you. Also, keep hooping. Sooner or later, you might beat me. Keep being a a magic worker. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is? We'll pretend he said kingdom worker. I'm so proud of you. Let your light shine bright. Love, Bennett. You guys, this is such an easy thing to do. It's so simple. Sometimes we think kingdom work is we have to go build a well in Africa or we have to go do something huge. But here's the deal. You guys, kingdom work is literally taking your gifts, your talents, and your abilities and using them to serve God's kingdom, to love and serve others. This little note meant the world to my son. You guys, he was literally taking the torch and passing it to the next generation. I want you to meet Luke. No, that's Luke Skywalker. Actually, the funny story about this is I needed a picture of this boy named Luke from the youth group, but I didn't get the picture before I left, so I just put Luke Skywalker. Is anybody named Luke in the audience that wouldn't mind helping me out? Do we have a Luke? Anyone? Do we really? No? Seriously, I'm totally serious right now. Is there a Luke in the audience? Is there anyone that wants to pretend that they are Luke? All right, you with no shoes, come on. All right, do we have a Ryan in the audience? Is anybody named Ryan? No Ryans? Ryan, I need a student named Ryan, not a, is it really? You don't want to come? Anyone want to pretend to be Ryan? All right, you in the back, come on. Yeah, you, come down. All right, anybody named Julia? Is there a Julia in the audience? For real? No, you're not Julia. I can't see. All right, girl, I need a girl to pretend to be Julia right here. Come on, down front. Yep. All right, and now I need a couple that is married that are leaders. Do we have some leaders that are married? Come on, where are you guys? Come on down. All right. All right, so you are going to be Luke, and you're going to stand right here, Luke.
Hi.
Hi, Luke. Everybody say hi, Luke. And you're going to be Ryan. Everybody say hi, Ryan. And you're going to be Julia. Everybody say hi, Julia. All right, this is going to be so good. And then we have, well, I'll tell you who they are in a minute, but you guys come on down here. You're going to stand right here. You guys are going to help me with my last story, okay? You're all help me. Just relax, look happy and natural. All right, so Luke is a kingdom worker. He loves Jesus with all his heart. He has a burning torch on the inside of him, and he wants to take this torch and pass it to his friend Ryan. His friend Ryan doesn't know Jesus. So Luke decides, I'm going to start praying for Ryan. As much as I remember, I'm going to start praying for my buddy Ryan. Everybody say hi to Ryan again. Hi, Ryan. So Luke's been praying for Ryan, and Luke says to Ryan one day, hey, our church is going to go to Believe. You guys ever been to Believe? It's a big, awesome conference put on by Christ in Youth just for junior hires. No, they didn't pay me to say that, but it is really super fun. And he invites him to Believe, and Ryan says yes. Say yes. Yes, he says yes. And then he says this, so he goes to Believe, and together they go, and guess what happens? Ryan finds out about Jesus and what Jesus did for him, and Ryan gives his life to Jesus, and Luke is so happy. There it is. And then Luke gets to baptize his friend Ryan. No, you don't need to baptize him. That would be really cool. But yes, dunk him, pretend to dunk him. So I want you to hold it. Be very careful. I've already broke it once. I'm already in big trouble with Pastor Larry. Okay, pass it to Ryan. Sorry, Larry. Yes, now Ryan has the torch in his hand. All right? Ryan decides, you know what? Believe was awesome, and I'm trying to live for Jesus now. And so that summer rolls around, and Luke and Ryan decide, you know what? We're going to go to Mix together, and it's going to be amazing. But Ryan's like, you know what? I know I just can't go alone because I have this torch that I'm supposed to pass on to someone, so I'm going to invite my sister, Julia, to come. Everybody say hi, Julia. So he invites Julia to come to Mix, and guess what happens at Mix? She meets Jesus, and she decides, you know what? I want to live my life for him. And now the torch is being passed from her brother Ryan to Julia, all right? Pass the torch, hold it loud and proud. There you go. Julia's happy now she met Jesus. Smile, Julia. Big smile, Julia. You can do it. There it is. So brother and sister, for 2 years, they are following Jesus. Their lives are changing. They're learning about him. They're growing in their faith, and they're living out their faith, not just at church, but at home and with their friends. And you know what? 2 years go by. They're being faithful. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're living for Jesus. They're trying to shine his light. 2 years go by, and they are at an Easter service. And my friend John is a pastor, and he sees these two brother and sister in the back room where they do all the baptisms. And he's like, that's strange. Julia and Ryan, they already got baptized. What are they doing up here? And then they realize that they're there with their parents. Everybody say, hi, Mom and Dad. They're there with their parents, and guess what their parents are doing? Ryan and Julia get to baptize their parents on last Easter. So pass the torch to Mom and Dad. Awesome, give it up for Mom and Dad. So it's literally gone from a boy who decided he wanted to pray for his friend Ryan because he wanted Ryan to know Jesus. Ryan invites his sister Julia to come, and then because of that, their parents come to faith. You guys, this is what it looks like to share our faith. This is what kingdom work continues. But you know what's really cool? We have this line here. We have no idea who Dad meets at work. We have no idea who Mom interacts with at the grocery store and doing her mom thing and going to work and doing whatever she does. So this to be continued thing could go on forever. And that's what we get to be a part of. Give it up for my volunteers. Give it up for my friends. They are amazing. And your feet really don't smell, Luke. It's awesome. It's good. Do you need shoes? We can provide those for you. You got them. Thanks, Luke. You guys, this is what we get to do at Mix. I don't know tonight, do you believe, don't miss this, do you believe that you can make a difference? Do you believe that you can take the torch when you go home and that you can pass this to someone? Are you thinking in your minds right now, this is the person God is calling me to start praying for? This is the person that I'm supposed to share my faith with and pass the torch. This is who I need to invite to youth group. Tonight in your small group, I want you to be really specific. What can I do to pass the torch? Because you guys, God's kingdom is to be continued. And you know what? We only get to see part of the story, but we get to be a part of it. God's kingdom work continues in us and through us. Let's pray.